ERP applications. As Adrian had mentioned, I've got a lot of experience in this area, but our organization has even more than I do. Just a brief history on who we are and why we're presenting the topic today. We trace our roots back to a company that has been developing MRP applications, ERP applications, since really the early 1990s, back on Unix platforms. And then in the kind of mid to late 1990s, we redeveloped a manufacturing solution on top of one of the Sage ERP products, Sage 500. And that application was actually acquired and became the manufacturing solution for Sage 500. Since then, we've developed this application we're going to be talking about later today. This is not a sales pitch. We're going to talk more about just some things you can do generally, regardless of the ERP system you're using. But if you have some deficiencies in the process, we do have an application that we developed called Anytime Supply Chain that would integrate with your accounting or your ERP application to really fill in some of those gaps. Okay. We also have worked with, as I mentioned, a number of different ERP applications, Epicor. We're an Intuit development partner, so we understand what is available in that application and what's not. So we have just a lot of knowledge working in this area. And as Adrian mentioned, we started with 15. There's probably a lot more than 24, but that's where we're sitting today. 24 things that we see people doing wrong every day, and some of these are simple things that you can make some changes in your business systems. So I guess without further ado, let's dig in. One slide here. Most of you on the call today understand what supply chain management is, but we do work with a lot of smaller companies that don't understand the full picture. So I thought it was important to pull this up. What we're basically looking to do in DRP, distribution requirements planning, or MRP with material requirements planning, is to balance our supply and demand, right? If we have either actual orders or forecasted orders in the system, we need to know, do we have enough stock on hand to fulfill that if I'm a distributor, or to make that, right? Because I need to drill down through my bill of material to my raw materials. And then I also need to take into account other things, right? I've got purchase orders, I've got transfer orders. You see this a lot in distribution. You do also see it in manufacturing, where I have warehouses replenishing other warehouses. Maybe I have a main stocking location, and that main distribution center replenishes smaller distribution centers or smaller manufacturing facilities. So you can get very complex in the supply chain. And there's really two components of it. You have plans and you have actuals, right? I've got actual sales or demand, but I have planned sales orders, right? Forecast. I've got actual work orders that are in the system. And then I've got planned work orders that might be driven off of a forecast. And all of this kind of relates to all the data that I have set up and all the parameters I've set up in my system, right? My lead times, my stocking levels, my safety stock, min-max order quantities, date calculations, the routing, how long does it take me to make an item, vendor lead times, all of this stuff, and there's a lot of it, impacts your material plan if you're a manufacturer, or your distribution plan if you're a distributor. So let's take a look at some of these mistakes. And the first one, you guys probably already knew this, is inaccurate inventory settings. We run into companies every single day that are missing values in one or two or dozens of their inventory settings in their system. And that's going to have an impact on your distribution plans and your manufacturing plans. Some things that we see, minimum order quantities aren't set up, right? It's just something that they skip, or they add a new item and it's not a required field, so they don't add a value there. If you don't have a minimum order quantity, or you don't have safety stock set up, when your MRP system runs or when your planners go to plan based on the data, they don't know how much to order. The system doesn't know how much to order. So one of the things we always tell our customers is go in and look at every single field in your inventory and make sure which ones have an impact on your plan. And then if you can, dump it out to Excel and find the values that have either a null value, meaning there was nothing set up, or a zero value, because there should be some value there that's going to impact your material plan. Vendor lead times. Now, hopefully your vendor lead times are always on time, like the picture we're looking at here, but vendors take time to ship product to you, and you need to take that into account, right? Especially if you're in a more complex distribution environment or manufacturing environment. If you're planning for zero lead time, you're going to be cutting your purchase orders to your vendors too late, right? They're not going to be able to get the product to you in time when you need it to either turn around and ship to your customer, or to be able to put it into work in process and manufacture the finished good that you're using to fulfill the demand for your customer. So that's another big one, is we find this every single day. Companies haven't set up vendor lead times, or they've never went back and reevaluated those lead times. Some vendors have gotten better, right? If I'm a supplier and I have really bad lead times with my customers, maybe I implement systems internally to get my lead times down. Well, now if your system is telling you it takes me a month to ship you product, but I'm always shipping it to you in a week, well, there's 3 additional weeks that you're incurring carrying costs. Or it could be the opposite. Maybe I've got a lot more demand for my product now, and instead of shipping it to you in a week, I'm shipping it to you in a month. You have to go back and reevaluate these vendor lead times periodically and find out what it is you have set up in the system that you're using for planning and what's actually happening in reality. This can also be extremely critical if you're sourcing product from overseas. I mean, as we all know, you can't get a product across the ocean in a boat in a week. You do have to take into account, product might get hung up into customs, or there might be some shipping problems. So vendor lead times are critical, and we do see it way too often that they're not set up properly. Supplier performance. Your vendor lead times are going to vary. Even with one vendor, it could vary by product that they're shipping. It could vary with the product that they're shipping you. Could range from days to weeks depending on their resources, on their availability, on their demand, on their products. So what you really need to do is you need to take a good look at this, maybe even have some discussions with your suppliers and say, look, I need realistic numbers here. You need to be sending me stuff. If you're telling me 2 weeks, I need to get it in 2 weeks. I don't care if you ship it a little bit earlier, but don't ship it much later, because we're going to have some problems. The other problem, and a lot of ERP systems have some of this information, some don't, are really the quality metrics around your supplier performance. On-time shipments, did they ship you the right product, the right quantity of product? In a lot of cases, we're distributing or manufacturing products that are very, very technical and have to be of certain quality. So a lot of times we receive that product in, and we might find out that, yeah, they shipped us the right product, they shipped us the right quantity of product, but it all needs to be reworked, or it's off spec. So I actually then have to process an RMA back to the vendor and wait for them to ship me good product. So you need to really look at not only the lead times with your suppliers, but also the quality of the product. And in many cases, what we recommend with our customers is you might have a preferred vendor for a product or a group of products, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a backup supplier. Maybe they're not the low-cost provider, but maybe they're the shorter lead time. So if you do have a problem with your primary vendor, you can go to somebody else. Right? This all makes sense. Warehouse transfers. Most small companies that we work with don't do warehouse transfers because they're operating in a single facility. But if you get into even kind of a mid-sized manufacturing or distribution environment, you're going to have the concept of a distribution center or maybe a centralized warehouse stocking location. Now, the problem here is that it makes financial sense in so many ways to stock a centralized location and then have that location replenish out to your manufacturing facilities or replenish out to your distribution facilities, right? But most accounting systems especially, you know, like the Sage, the Microsoft applications that are a little more generic, they don't really have the concept of a warehouse transfer. And people try to work around that by setting up kind of this bogus in-transit warehouse. I mean, I know you guys are nodding on the call. A lot of you probably have done this. And the problem with that is you don't have really what's called a three-step transfer to move inventory from one to the transit to the receiving warehouse. And that really needs to be the case. You need to have visibility of the supply and demand through that chain. And that's one of the things that we actually bring to the table over and above what most accounting systems provide today. Stocking levels, and I couldn't find a good graphic, so we have a little level here. It's on plumb. But, you know, this is huge. You know, I went up to a company one time, and I'll save you the explicits, but the guy had a problem with his inventory. And his problem wasn't anything that we could fix. His problem was that he had people on the shop floor that were stealing parts from other jobs, and then he was short on other stuff, and he had a shrinkage problem. He had a lot of theft within his organization. But there's other reasons why your stocking levels might be off. Now, if your system's telling you you've got 100 pieces in stock, but because you had some scrap, because you had maybe some theft, maybe a forklift backed into a pallet and damaged some product, and maybe you miscounted on your physical inventory. Maybe you've never done a physical inventory count to find out where you're at. You actually have 87 on hand. What's going to happen if you need that 100 units to ship to a customer or to use in manufacturing to provide a product to your customer? You're going to be short, and that's going to cause you problems with your customers, and potentially could cause you to lose a customer. So getting your inventory levels accurate are very critical to your planning. And again, this is something we all know. From a physical inventory standpoint, there's lots of ways to do that. Most of the software on the market today has this capability, but most companies don't use it effectively. So I do suggest that if your inventory system has a physical inventory capability, call your reseller, find out, or your publisher, if you're working directly with the publisher, and find out how to use it effectively. You should be doing inventory on every item at least annually for items that have what we call a high hit volume. They're being hit with demand and movements more frequently. You know, you should be doing those physical inventories quarterly, if not monthly. Sales order dates. It amazes me. We've been selling ERP software for years. And it amazes me how many people have no idea what dates within their ERP system that the MRP or the DRP application is using when it looks at demand. I'll give you an example of this. On a sales order, how many different dates are there on a sales order? Right? You have the sales order creation date. You might have the expected ship date. You might have the sales order entry date, which could be different. You could have a confirmation date. You could have a promise date. Which of those dates is your MRP system going to use to tell you when do you need to have this product to the customer, right? Because then we have to back that up on vendor lead times for the items we're purchasing, or we have to back it up even further with our manufacturing and our vendor lead times if we're making that product. Now, in most of the systems we've worked with, there is a promise date, and that probably is going to be the date that MRP is going to look at. But what happens if the promise date is blank? And a lot of times those promise dates aren't required fields. So then what's the next step down in that hierarchy? Is it going to then go to the expected ship date or the order creation date? So understand what those dates are. That's going to help you out considerably. Inaccurate inventory. And now you can take this a step further, inaccurate bill of material. So many times we have, especially in manufacturing environments where you're making a lot of different products, you may have an item that you don't make very often. You set up the bill of material one time and you didn't set it up right. And you go to make that item, and maybe it manufactures fine, but maybe you had the quantity wrong, the quantity required for one of the components. Or maybe you made a change to that bill of material in engineering, but it never got updated into your bill of materials system. Having inaccurate inventory or bills of material are going to cause MRP or DRP to plan for the wrong quantities of items. It could even be something with scrap. Maybe you had a problem with scrap for a while and now you're not, or maybe it's the opposite. So going back and reviewing the settings on each of your bill of material items periodically is just as important as doing your physical inventories. Routing operation lead times. When we manufacture an item, in some cases, depending on the nature of your business, I've seen companies that could make a product in a matter of seconds, if not minutes, especially in an automated fashion. But companies that manufacture large capital equipment, fire trucks, you name it, those can be year-long manufacturing projects. So you really need to nail down what are the operating lead times in addition to my vendor lead times. And each step in the manufacturing process takes an amount of time, right? It might take me 1 day to machine the part, another day to assemble it, another day to do some other upstream operation on that. And that all adds up. If those are inaccurate, then MRP is going to give me the wrong dates. I could be making it earlier than I need. I could be making it later than I need. So this is another common mistake. I would pick a handful of routings, calculate what that time should be, and then go into your MRP system, run it, and see if that's the dates that you get. Move and queue time. We don't find this in every industry, but it is prevalent in many industries. Move time, pretty self-explanatory. It's the time that it takes me to move my work in process from one machine or work center to another, right? And in many cases, that's in the same facility, so it's not a big deal. But in some cases, I need to actually move that to a subcontractor. Maybe I'm outsourcing heat treating, plating, coating. If I haven't taken into account the amount of time it takes me to move that to my outside processor and then to receive that quantity back in, that's going to dramatically impact, obviously, again, my material plans. Queue time is similar, but basically what queue time is wait time. So if I'm painting an item and it needs to dry for an hour, or if I'm heat treating it, I need to make sure it cools for an hour before I move it. In plastics, you get curing. Maybe in process manufacturing, you need something to settle in a batch or a solution for a period of time for a chemical reaction. So there's lots of reasons why things just need to sit and wait. Setup and reset up. We see this more often in more of a machine shop environment. I could set up a machine. A lot of times, setting up these machines can take a day. Setting up a CNC machine or maybe a very particular piece of equipment. Number one, not everybody can do it, so I got to make sure that I have labor, somebody that's trained on how to do that setup. Number two, I got to make sure the machine's available. But then I go set it up. I'm going to run the job, and maybe that machine becomes out of spec over so many parts produced. Maybe I need to change a die or a jig or a mold after every 1,000 or 10,000 parts that are produced. So then I need to reset that machine. If it takes me another 6 hours or 2 hours to reset that machine or that work center up, I need to take that into account into my MRP so that I know that I can't just force this thing through, especially if I have larger jobs. Number 11, internal lead times. There's a lot of lead times internally that don't have nothing to do with our manufacturing process. They could be things like, how long does it take me to move product from a shipping dock to my on-hand available inventory? I receive product. I might have a backlog in shipping and receiving. The product just sits there on the pallet. I've received it, but unless it gets into the system, MRP doesn't see it as available. Maybe when I receive that product, I need to inspect it. I need to do a QC inspection to make sure it's exactly what I wanted. Maybe I need to repack it. Maybe I need to do other things to it. There are other things that can impact your internal lead times. Maybe I don't have resources to actually stock the product or to get that information into the system. So I would look at all of those factors that affect time and or quantity. Planning dates and calendars. Does your planning calendar take into account holidays, planned and unplanned preventive maintenance, and other constraints on your resources? The MRP and DRP by nature are infinite in respect to resource and capacity. And that's a bad thing. What you really want to do is you want to tie your MRP specifically into like an APS, an advanced planning and scheduling system, that can show you, all right, well, MRP is assuming 24/7 capacity, and I always have everything on hand. But in reality, I've got other priorities, right? I've only got so much labor. I might have tooling and jigs or dies that's only available at certain times. I might have a machine down for annual repair, or I might have a machine go down. So I might have a holiday, right? I might be on plant shutdown. Well, if MRP is telling me to make stuff when I'm on plant shutdown, I really need to back that up. So I would look at all of the dates, the planning calendars, and all the things that might impact your material plan. You may want to look at an APS application. We don't sell those. There are a number of them available on the market. Preactor and Plan It Together are two of the more common ones available. A lot of the ERP applications on the market also have some of this available. Many companies don't buy that module, but you may want to look into it. Planning period size. This one's huge, and this one's pretty easy. So how are you planning? Are you using your inventory calendar? And a lot of accounting systems that we've worked with have the concept of an inventory calendar, but they don't allow you to plan in different period sizes, right? So inventory calendars are typically, based on our experience, set up in monthly periods. But that may not make sense to me to manage my material plans or my distribution plans in monthly periods. What if I'm actually producing stuff every day, right, shipping stuff every day? I could probably be better off planning in weekly periods. But that's really only for my primary items. What if I have items that are slower moving? I may want to actually plan for those in 6-month periods, because it doesn't make any sense for me to plan on these onesie-twosies as they come in the door. So you need to look at each item, almost even each item by warehouse, and define, how do I want to plan for this item? Do I want to do weekly? Do I want to do monthly? Do I want to do quarterly? We've had companies who worked with in a number of different industries. One of them was really interesting. It was a company that distributed tea, and if they didn't forecast and plan appropriately, the world's tea supply for this particular type of tea, or a couple of different types of tea that they would buy, if they didn't buy it at the same time every year and buy enough for the entire year's demand they would have, the world's supply of this tea would disappear. And what that would cause them is obviously a lot of unhappy customers. They'd have customers buying their other products that wanted this other product and couldn't get it now, or the price would escalate to the point where they might have to buy it at a loss, buy and sell at a loss, just to keep these customers happy. So you're going to want to look at each of these items. Some items you might want to, if you're sourcing overseas, you're not going to want to plan weekly. You don't want to optimize how many items can I, or what quantity can I get in that carton to get over here from my production facility or from my distribution center. Inaccurate demand forecast. And this lady's a little bit scary, but sometimes forecasting is as well. And in a lot of industries, it's almost impossible to forecast, right? Job shops, it's very tough. Everything's kind of a one-off. You don't really know what the demand's going to be for a particular item. But in a distribution environment and in a make-to-stock environment, you should be able to do some demand forecasting. And quite frankly, you have to. And what you need to do is you need to get really good at this. Now, in some industries, your previous history will be indicative of your future demand. We work with a couple customers that supply consumer products to big box retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods, and they can look back and they can see seasonal patterns in their demand. They can see growth year over year for different product lines, and they can actually use that information, put it into a statistical forecasting system like a Forecast Pro that we highly recommend, and it will then return a statistical forecast, demand forecast for you based on all these algorithms. And it'll look at exponential smoothing, Box-Jenkins, Croston's intermittent method. It'll apply seasonality forecasts, all kinds of crazy things, and give you a forecast. Now, that isn't really reality for everybody, but in a lot of cases, I can at least look at what did I do last year, what did I do the year before. I can get at least a benchmark of, are these product lines growing, are they shrinking? What if we did some promotions around these products? Could we actually increase the sales and the demand? And so, maybe it's even looking at your CRM system and identifying that your sales reps are putting in opportunities and forecasts, and they're 80% accurate. Well, if you base, kind of a number off of what they're forecasting, you might be able to tie the two things together. But inaccurate demand forecasts, what they're going to mean is at the end of the day, you're planning to make too much or too little. And in either result, you're going to end up with some unhappy customers, a lot of rush orders, etc. Customer forecast confidence. This one happens quite often. Almost everybody has a customer that you're pretty sure you're going to get orders from, and you're pretty confident that those orders are going to come in over a period of time. It could even be a contract, right? It could be a blanket sales order. I'm sorry, a blanket sales order you have set up with your customer. It could be a contract you have set up. We see this all the time in automotive supply chains, right, where General Motors is going to give me 100,000 parts order over the year, but they're going to tell me when to actually ship those. They're going to adjust the dates and the quantities on those. What I don't want to happen is for a Bluebird order to come in from somebody else. Let's say I've got a forecast out there for June for General Motors for 1,000 units of this item, and I've got a contract with them. I know that order is going to come in. But all of a sudden, one of my sales reps sells 1,000 units of the same item to somebody else. Well, I haven't gotten that order yet from General Motors, so I'm going to ship the 1,000 units in stock to this other customer that was my Bluebird order. And now what happens? I don't have the stock on hand to fulfill General Motors, which is on contract and is a great customer. This is one of the things we've actually added into our forecasting software is the ability to put a forecast confidence when you're forecasting by customer. So I could say, General Motors, I'm 100% confident that I'm going to get that order. So if another order comes in, it's not going to consume that forecasted demand. Min-max order quantities. If I am distributing or manufacturing and having to use fasteners, which is very, very common, right? Bolts, nuts, washers. If I have safety stock set up for, maybe I want to keep 1,000 of these fasteners on hand at any given time, if I fall to 999, do I really want to go buy one? No. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What I really need to do is have the system be intelligent enough or allow me to be able to tell it, whenever I order this part, I'm never going to order in less than a minimum quantity of 1,000, right? Or maybe my vendor's telling me my internal production batch size or quantity is in 1,000 gallons or in 1,000 units or in a truckload if I'm ordering, products like steel coil or whatever, steel rod. So I need the system to be able to let me define what is that order minimum to my vendor and what is the order multiple. So even if I go 1 unit below the safety stock, I'm going to always order to the minimum, and I'm never going to order more than the maximum on that purchase order to my vendor. Order multiples. Yeah, I've got a dozen eggs here, right? You can't go to the store and you can't buy 1 egg. In a lot of cases when we're dealing with our vendors, we can't buy 1 each, right? Or we can't buy 1 pint or 1 ounce. In a lot of cases, we have to buy in a purchasing unit of measure, not in a stocking unit of measure or in a manufacturing unit of measure. And we need to look at this, right? So if MRP is telling me that I need 6 eggs, I really need to buy a dozen eggs if that's my minimum order multiple. Same thing with like a carton, right? Maybe I have 6 units in a carton. I can't buy 1 unit from my supplier because they send it to me in a carton. So I need to set that up that every time MRP suggests a purchase order for me, it's going to suggest a full carton. Okay, so that's another thing that we've added into our product that we see time and time again is not available in some of the other MRP systems on the market. Scrap yield and loss. If we look at just even a distribution environment, you're going to have shrinkage depending on the nature of the product that you're distributing. If it happens to be chemicals, you might end up with evaporation. If it's food products, you're going to end up with spoilage. If it's hard goods, you're going to end up with products that do inevitably become damaged, or there's other reasons for scrap and loss. And if you're in manufacturing, that's going to be compounded even more because you're going to have scrap and shrinkage during the manufacturing process, as well as with your raw materials sitting on the shelf and your finished goods sitting on the shelf. And all of the scrap yield and loss needs to be taken into account in your material planning. Getting close, folks. Safety stock. Do you have safety stock set up in the system? So many times, this is another one of those fields that is never set up. Is the safety stock level high enough to cover unexpected spikes in demand? Is it too high, resulting in inflated carrying costs? Right? If I'm carrying too much stock, there's a cost, and we all know that. It could be carrying costs alone. It could be the fact that I now need to expand my warehouse because I'm running out of shelf space. When, it could even be the risk associated, right? If I'm distributing a product and I'm carrying a lot of stock and this product has a lot of revisions or a lot of changes in it, all of a sudden the vendor changes or my customer requests a different version of it. Now I've got all this antiquated stock in my warehouse that I'm basically going to have to try to return to my vendor if I can, or to just dispose of it, right, and write it off. So you don't want your safety stock to be too high. So definitely take a look at that. And that's going to change over time too, right? If you start selling more of one product, you're probably going to want to increase the safety stock for that item. But so often we set up the system and we forget about it, right? We implement the application, we never go back and make these adjustments. Exclude locations. I've got my poor little gummy bear here, and he's excluded. There are many reasons why you want to exclude locations within your business from MRP or DRP. If I receive a product and I want to make sure that I do a QC inspection, I don't want to include that quantity of product I've received as being available for distribution, shipping, or production, because I don't know if it's a good product, right? Especially if I'm dealing with products that need to be within spec. Maybe I'm supplying aerospace and defense or food products or chemical. So I need to exclude a quarantined area where I can put my stock. MRP is going to say, I don't see it, I'm ignoring it, it's not there. And then once I validate that that is in fact good product, I can move it to an on-hand available stocking location. QC is a big one. Some other examples might be if I'm doing vendor-managed inventories, I might have a location in my warehouse where I'm actually stocking the vendor-managed inventory, but I don't want to count that as available until I move it out of the VMI warehouse or bin and into an on-hand available, meaning I'm now recognized that it is in fact my inventory. I'm taking ownership of that inventory and the risk and obviously the cost of that inventory as well. It could be that I've got inventory that's staged for shipping. Some applications have the concept of staging bins. If it's staged for shipment or staged for use in manufacturing, it's as good as gone. We have seen customers that have wanted to exclude staging bins or different warehouse locations from the on-hand MRP calculations. Now let's look at resources. Now, MRP and DRP are working in kind of this idealistic world where nothing ever goes wrong, right? You can work on all the tips that we've talked about in the first 20 slides here, and you're still going to have problems. A vendor's going to have a problem shipping you a product because they can't make it. You're going to have a strike with a shipping company. You're going to have reasons why you don't have enough material on hand. This becomes almost less of an MRP problem or DRP problem and more of kind of a people planning problem. What I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm not releasing work orders to production if I don't physically have that product in stock, or I'm not confident I'm going to have the raw materials in stock that I need to make it. We had a company we were working with out in California, and they were sourcing these wiring harnesses from overseas. These are very inexpensive wiring harnesses that would go into this very complicated equipment. So what would happen is they would run their MRP, it would generate all these planned work orders, they'd release them in production, they'd start manufacturing these pieces of equipment, they'd get to a downstream operation, and lo and behold, they don't have wiring harnesses. Well, they're not going to disassemble everything they've done up to that point. Now they have to wait 3 to 6 months for these wiring harnesses to get over here, to clear customs, and to come in. Meanwhile, they have orders for other products that use some of the components that they had that are now stuck in work in process on these other machines that they were making. It was an absolute nightmare. So we actually have an application we developed. It's on the Sage 500 platform, but you can do some of this stuff in Excel as well. Is make sure if you're releasing work orders to production that you're not going to have an issue with all of your downstream material requirements. All right, so that's just a tip for you there. Labor resources are also huge. Again, MRP and DRP are infinite in terms of capacity. If you have spikes in demand, if you have seasonality, most businesses know this. Look at your labor resources. Make sure that you have enough people in place to operate the machines or to work in the warehouse, to do picking, and then analyze what are the costs for overtime or hiring more resources. Tooling. Tooling's huge. I could have the people, I could have the material, I could even have a machine available. But if I'm in a CNC operation, see all these pieces of equipment here, these are all cutters. If I only have a handful of these cutters and I know I need them for particular types of jobs, and I've got multiple jobs running out there and only one cutter, that's going to be a capacity constraint on me, and I'm obviously not going to be able to get that job done at the same time. Tooling's one thing. Tooling's relatively cheap, I guess. Some of it can be pretty expensive. But I want to make sure I have enough tooling available. Maybe I can schedule stuff. Maybe I can run more than one job at a time if I know I'm going to have future demand for that item. Jigs, a lot of industries, there's jigs that hold the things together when they're making them. Dies and molds, if I'm in plastic injection molding or stamping operations. If I only have one die that the stamping press can use, I can't run it on other presses. I can't run that job on multiple presses. If I only have one mold that can make this particular item, then I've got to wait until that mold's available for me. So again, all of this is going to impact your planning. Last but not least here, machine resources. Do you have enough capacity on your machines for the planned work orders? Or will you need to add a second or third shift? Again, this gets into kind of some of the labor considerations. You may also be able to outsource. We have seen that when there's spikes in demand. Some of our customers have chosen to outsource some of the manufacturing where they reach these capacity constraints on their machines. So those are the 24 tips. Hopefully you got something out of that. At this point, I am going to talk a little bit about Anytime Supply Chain, which is an application we designed to work with your accounting or ERP application. I have one screen up here. This is a preview of the Windows 8 application that we're developing for Anytime Supply Chain. Basically what it is, it's an MRP planning workbench that would run on a Windows 8 tablet or machine. And you can see here, it's going to tell you what orders do you need to plan for. What do I need to make? What do I need to buy and when? And this application will be really nice, I think, especially for the smaller companies like somebody using QuickBooks or Peachtree, where they don't have a very sophisticated process. Really what it is a to-do list. Go create these work orders. Go create these purchase orders. Okay. Let's switch over and give you a little overview of Anytime Supply Chain. This is a web-based sales forecasting, DRP, and MRP planning system. So I'm just going to log in. And the GoToMeeting slows me down slightly, so bear with me while it loads up here. So when I come into Anytime Supply Chain, the first thing you're going to see is my MRP Action Summary. If I'm a distributor, the only difference between DRP and MRP is the fact that I don't have work orders, right? I'm not making anything. But I could still have, I'm going to have planned purchase orders, I'm going to have sales orders, I'm going to have forecasts, and I could potentially, in both environments, distribution and manufacturing, have transfers. So what we've done is we've pulled all this data in that we've talked about on the presentation today, and we're giving you an action message summary. What do I as a planner need to do based on all this information? I've got 134 purchase orders in the system that I don't need. I should go ahead and cancel them. I could click on that link and I can go then cancel those. I've got work orders that I need to move in to cover demand. I've got transfer orders that I need to move in. I've got 4 items where the replenishment parameters that MRP needs weren't set up, so it's telling me that I need to go check out these parameters for these items because MRP doesn't know what to do with them. Okay, I can see my late orders, and this will display all kinds of different action messages. The goal here is really to manage MRP by exception. If everything else is good, then why do I need to worry about it? Let it be. What I need is I need MRP and DRP to tell me what do I need to move in, what do I need to move out, what do I need to cancel, and what do I need to create to manage that supply and demand. So let me just go ahead here and let's see here. Let's look at the purchase order side. It'll apply to everybody. I'll just go ahead and click on this move in purchase order. Again, GoToMeeting slows me up slightly. It's a little faster without it. So here's all my messages for my move-in, and I can look at these. I can see the item information here in the top grid. This is basically my main view of the information. That's going to then load up the information in these other tabs, and it's still thinking about it here with the GoToMeeting running. So here at the bottom for this particular item, I've got this information here. I've got a transaction view of the detail. So what's my beginning balance? What do I have planned on purchase order, for that item? Okay, and I can kind of move this stuff around. It's just really my planning workbench. I can see what's late. I can see if there's an action message attached to this. And I can see the buyer related to this. So I can even do different plans based on different buyers or different planners. I can filter this down, have different plans for different warehouses, different groups of inventory items. Over here, I can see the action message related to this. Here I can see what it's telling me to do, what the issues are, what purchase order it's on. If it happens to be a work order, I get the work order information. And I can even drill down and view, that purchase order right from here as well, whether it's an actual purchase order or a planned purchase order. Okay. This is designed for a very large screen or to work in a split screen environment, so I can actually move stuff around and get a lot of different information available right in front of me, sort of as a dashboard. And then here at the bottom, I've got my inventory details, so I know for this particular item all the parameters. Right? What's my max order quantity? What's my minimum order quantity? Min-max stocking level, safety stock level. My adjusted on hand takes out that safety stock. Do I make or buy a % over every time? Just to make sure that I'm covering myself. Is it tied to a blanket? All this information now, depending on the accounting or ERP system you're using, your system may not have some of this stuff, and that's okay because you can manage that within our application. If I go into setup into the master files, right, maybe I want to look at inventory as an example. Maybe my accounting system doesn't allow me to set up an order multiple or a minimum order quantity or a maximum order quantity. That's okay. Set up all the other parameters in your bill of material, in your routing, in your inventory, and then simply maintain that other information in anytime supply chain. So you can see here, I can actually maintain my on-hand quantities. Well, not on-hand, probably a bad example, but maybe my safety, my min stock, my max stock, minimum order, maximum order, and order multiples. So I can maintain that information here. Just go into edit mode. Yeah. Just go ahead here and go into edit mode. So now I can maintain this information that was never available to me before. Again, we mentioned earlier, a lot of companies don't have the ability to do warehouse transfers. You can do that within anytime supply chain because we give you that ability. Okay. We also have forecasting. So if you don't have currently the ability to forecast demand to drive your material planning, and obviously you want your actual sales orders to consume that forecast, that's something else you can do with anytime supply chain. We manage it by a forecast group. And so these can be set up however you want. It could be by a product line, by a warehouse facility, could be by the type of period that you're planning, which items are part of that forecast. How do you want to forecast it monthly, but how do you want to view that information in MRP? Maybe I'm forecasting monthly, but I'm planning weekly. What do I do if I forecasted 100 units, but I only got sales orders for 80 units? Do I want to roll that unconsumed forecast forward to the next planning period? That's what this is here. And then, I can actually create a spreadsheet that I can use to manage my forecast and then upload that in to drive my MRP. Okay. This, again, is a very, very high-level view. I could probably spend another hour just going over the anytime supply chain product. But we're not going to do that today. So in the essence of time, we are going to wrap up the webinar and go into a Q&A.
Thank you, Jim. Great job.
Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I do have a poll for the audience. I wanted to go ahead and slide that poll up there for everyone to answer. We can take a moment. Are you interested in learning more about anytime supply chain? And I'm looking for questions. We do have a few requests, quite a few requests, Jim, for recording of the presentation and the presentation slides. So can we make that available for the attendees after the webinar?
I can. I'll shoot the slide deck over to you, and obviously you'll be recording it and putting it up on YouTube.
Yes, I will. I will handle the recording. And so we'll get the slides out to those who have requested it. And I see 55% of you have voted, so if we could just take another moment. And Jim, I had a question. Can you change the color of the application? Is that pretty easy? I noticed that you had a black background. Would you be able to change it?
Yes, you can. Yeah, okay. You can. We do offer some different skinning options on that. We like the black because, iPads, and it's good for marketing. But a lot of companies would prefer to go with a white background. It makes it a little easier to see.
And I'm monitoring to see if we have any other questions, and I don't see any. And 58% have voted now, so if we could just take another moment just to take this poll, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll out and share the results. So it looks like 33% Jim are interested in learning more, 67 not at this time. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide those results and make sure that everybody takes Jim's contact information down should you have any questions. Jim is an expert in ERP in manufacturing systems. And Jim, I think you have a couple trade shows coming up. What trade shows will you guys be at in the near future?
Well, we're going to be doing the Scaling New Heights conference, which is an Intuit QuickBooks related conference. That'll be in Orlando in June. I don't have the exact dates. I think it's like 23rd. Then we're going to be, we actually just wrapped up the Epicor show in Nashville. And we're going to be doing the SAGE conference, which is in July in Washington, D.C. And then the fall, we'll be back at the Intact Advantage trade show. So we do get around to a lot of the publishers and try to hit the different shows. We did just also conclude vendor fair for Sage 50 at Peachtree down in Atlanta. I went down and talked to them and their internal folks about a lot of different products and how they can use that to sell more Peachtree or Sage 50.
Well, perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions. It was a great presentation, Jim. If you had anything else to close with.
The only other thing that I'll mention is that with the anytime supply chain, you don't have to go that route to be good at planning, but you do get to a point as a distributor or manufacturer where you need a system that, and a lot of people try to do this in Excel. Anytime supply chain will tie into your existing system. We're not really replacing anything. We're just augmenting what you have. At the end of the day, you're going to get an ROI with it because you're going to have a more accurate material plan. You're going to avoid stockouts. You're going to avoid overstock. You're going to avoid carrying costs. You're going to avoid lost customers. And it's really going to make you a lot more efficient, a lot more profitable. And it's very affordable. I mean, we're looking at we haven't finalized some of the pricing, so we are looking to bring the pricing down at the lower end for the QuickBooks in the Peachtree space. But right now we're looking at about $200 per user per month on subscription for the forecasting piece, and then another $200 per user per month for the MRP or the DRP planning. And if you think about it, I mean, that's really, really affordable for the value you're going to get out of the application. So I guess I'd leave everybody with that. Consider us if you want to take a deeper dive into it. If you want to get somebody else in your organization to take a look at the product, do so. I am working on a white paper that will accompany this presentation. I don't have it finished, but any of the folks attending today, I'd be happy to share that with them once I get that completed. It'll have a little more detail on it.
And Jim, we do have a question here. Does system track forecast tracking signals?
And I'm assuming what they mean their forecast tracking signals would be changes in the forecast, I'm assuming. What a lot of our customers are doing is they're taking anytime supply chain and they're exporting the demand from their accounting system, like the history out of their accounting system, running that through a tool like Forecast Pro to get a statistical forecast, importing that into anytime supply chain, and then using that to drive their demand. We don't actually have that embedded in the product today. It is on our roadmap down the road. We have a legacy application we developed for the Sage 500 product that did have that capability. We just haven't built it into the latest version here.
And then what about S and OP compatibility?
Well, that could be a bunch of different things with sales and operations planning. To be honest, I mean, we're doing a lot around forecasting and material planning. The data is there. It is a SQL database. We haven't talked about doing anything formally for S&OP planning, but certainly all this information has an impact on S&OP. So it might be able to help, but I'd probably need a little more information to be able to answer that intelligently. So I guess my contact information is up on the screen with that particular question. If they wanted to email me, I could probably get them a better answer.
And we do have the question and the person asking the question documented, Jim, so we can get back to them specifically about that. Were there any other questions? I see we have a few folks left on the line. I'm just going to take a moment to monitor the webinar pane to see if there's any more questions. And I'm not seeing any, Jim. Well, thank you so much. Your knowledge is obviously vast on this subject, so we appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. And we're going to go ahead and email everybody a copy of the webinar recording, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you to everybody that attended today. Hopefully you got something out of it.
Thank you, and everybody have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Bye-bye.